So I will now start my own presentation that is titled Technology of Consciousness, Artificial Intelligence and Life Wisdom, and trying to, of course, contrast this notion of artificial intelligence with what I will call life wisdom. And by this, I mean the continuity, strong continuity thesis of life and mind, but especially I will explore it according to its Indian and Tibetan expressions in Buddhist sources. So to speak, the embodied cognition as it was understood in Buddhist text. So what I really hope, I'm very aware, and although this session is about minds, but for Buddhist philosophy of mind is not just a theoretical enterprise. It's highly practical. It's eminently practical. And we are very aware, all of us here and many people online, of the existential stakes that are connected to AI. And I hope that here together we can envision, and with this dialogue among Buddhist traditions and cognitive sciences, creative solutions to cope with the age of AI and maybe envision a contemplative turn of AI. I'd like to talk about Buddhist sources as offering technologies of consciousness, and we've been talking about superintelligence or artificial general intelligence, but there is also another aspect in the field of AI that used to be intelligence augmentation, and I will argue that Buddhism, and especially awakening, was an ancient model of intelligence augmentation that could be maybe offer some complementary insight, although it's a bit tricky, because awakening is also very much about removing and letting go of the ego, so to speak. So here's in 10 minutes only the different points I'd like to explore through the Buddhist ideas about the nature of mind and especially about phenomenal consciousness. And then I'll talk about mind and wind. And from this perspective, I'll try to envision a viable ecology of natural and artificial intelligence, not at this point opposing them, but seeing some viable possible model. So nature of mind is the big question in the Tibetan traditions, and they lead this very important compendium. The mind, unlike physical things, is difficult to identify. Yet, if we train our mind, then in reliance on mindfulness, meta-awareness, heedfulness, and so on, we will attain both temporary and final happiness. For the Buddhist tradition, the root of suffering is that we ignore the nature of our minds. So that's not a small element. So knowing one's own mind is very much the definition of awakening. And those are the three qualities: emptiness, luminous clarity, and awareness. And those three phenomenal aspects are really at the core of Tibetan non-dual meditation traditions, as we will see. But we should not assume that Buddhism is actually, there is in Buddhism to some extent a form of substance dualism. This quote is a bit complex, but what it is saying is that for Shantarakshita, who is actually also here, consciousness and matter are opposite. So for classical Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, consciousness does not emerge out of physical system. So that's just something to consider, but we will move to other perspectives that can allow us to envision the mind-body dualism in another way. But let's not assume everybody's saying the same thing. So what is also very important in the age of AI is to rethink that the knowledge of the mind in Buddhism is also practical ways to shape the mind. And Buddhist training is about the discipline of moral agency. And in the age of AI, that's becoming a hugely important issue. And it's also about, with shamatha meditation, the unification of the stream of consciousness, like shaping, structuring. We talk more about stream of consciousness rather than self. But then there's, of course, discernment, like not being identified with thoughts, ceilings, having this larger space in which experience can be seen, but we can explore this freedom or discover this freedom. That's at the core of the Buddhist knowledge of the mind. In order for the mind to know itself, there are two mental factors that are extraordinarily important: mindfulness and meta-awareness, but that they are not limited to what the Western tradition used to call introspection. This is covering it, but this is very much beyond it. So let's go to the core. And of course, to connect already with Sean's, we have the space of possible mind. So I will say that what the Buddhist tradition is doing is going deeper into the center, exploring, this me, or this experiencing the world itself. So of course, the ways of establishing mindfulness is very well known, but there are ways to really work with experience itself. And this is Nagarjuna's version of embodied cognition. He wrote, Lord, the Buddha taught mindfulness established in the body as a single path to progress. This hold fast and guard it well, for all the Dharma is destroyed by the loss of mindfulness. So really, minding the body is the core of the path to freedom, according to the Buddhist tradition. And thus, I would say the mind-body problem is not only an unresolved metaphysical question, it's an existential gap that each one of us needs to bridge by deeply minding one's lived body. Then the capacity of minding the body allows, and this is really at the core of Buddhist soteriology, or the capacity to free the mind to be mindful of feelings, pleasure and pain, but before reacting. Or even if we react, we're aware of the reaction. And that's through the development of bodily awareness. And that's very much at the core of phenomenal consciousness. And I would say that the modern world can be seen, so to speak, abstract thinking, can be seen as a defense mechanism for not to feel. Because that's the issue. What makes the hard problem of consciousness so hard, and of course this is a little bit of a joke, is that being conscious entails the very hardship of experiencing or embracing painful feelings. So it's tempting, in order not to feel, to think or overthink or live in the head. But the Buddhist approach offers another way to feel and embracing the pain, but in a different way. And this is quite important because the point I will make here in reference to Marc-Henri's phenomenology is that so in this book, Marc-Henri traced back the self-destructive tendencies of our contemporary civilization into the Galilean rejection of subjectivity. The connection with AI here is that we think about existential risks of misaligned AI, for example. But this has to be, we have been the one who have developed those AI systems in the first place. So they can be the extension of our own self-destructive tendencies. So Henri interpreted this rejection of subjectivity as a sophisticated yet tragic attempt to escape the ordeals of sensibility and affectivity. And as he warned, the pain that is not fully experienced cannot become transformed and sublimated into the higher creations of culture. It becomes very, very destructive. It's transformed into anguish, and it's projected outward or inward. And for him, he would consider culture as a cultivation of life, of lived experience. So recently, Michel Bitbol has also expanded this interpretation to the age of AI. I will go quite quickly now. But what we have in the Tibetan tradition is the capacity with non-dual traditions to really cultivate this natural freedom by really exploring the very core phenomenal consciousness. And of course, we have this symbol of Samantabhadra Buddha, which is a representation of naked awareness. So this, I'm just mentioning those perspectives, other perspectives. So the West has very much explored the possibility of trying to get away from phenomenal consciousness. But here in the Tibetan tradition, we have the exact opposite approach. And this is maybe what can enrich our dialogue today. But one more important point, even in those deepest meditative traditions that focuses on phenomenal consciousness itself or the nature of mind itself, they insist on bodily practice. And why? Because according to the tantric accounts of the nature of mind, or the deepest mind, the most subtle mind, it is said to be always inseparable from what they call the wind, or lung, or prana. So there is this beautiful idea of the indivisibility of mind and wind, lung sem ngo yerme. Or there is even the idea of the primordial body mind. Of course, this is the deepest mind, but this is, I'm mentioning those ideas to following Murray, to expand the space of possible minds and to consider minds also by including this deeper dimension of the very center of your mandala of possible minds, so to speak. So this is the way of the Tibetan tradition. They explore the deepest vital energy of wind, and that serve to the emergence of what we call natural wisdom. And of course, I see as a Tibetologist, when I hear about artificial intelligence, I always have this concept of Rangjung Yeshe as a kind of alternative, so to speak, or other point of view. So just to conclude, how do we make sense of all those different ideas? So we have, according to the work of Yazan Gabriel, this notion of the tetratic relationship, in which hopefully a deeper knowledge of contemplative practice could potentially play a vital role. So you have the conscious experience of the designer, the cognitive architecture of the machines, the conscious experience of the users, and then the larger society. But the point is that at the beginning, design, and at the end, use there is phenomenal consciousness. And this is maybe what we need to take into account in order to cultivate it in a way that is not destructive, and that is actually leading to more human flourishing. So this is my idea. And in the end, I will say that really facing the possibilities of self-destruction, we need to think how to realign our natural minds and then our artificial creations with what I will call, with His Holiness, universal responsibility. Or maybe thinking about it as a deeper intelligence of life and an alignment with a deeper intelligence in communion, so to speak, or in connection with all sentient beings. And of course, the hope is that by mindfully designing AI systems and integrating contemplative principles, techniques, and functions in a design, development, and deployment of AI systems, they could support human flourishing. But, and I advocate with this notion of mind-win non-dual, the continuity thesis of life and mind and life. And of course, even those beautiful tankas, they represent a deeper intelligence of life. And of course, I live in Kyoto, so for me, this connection with nature is to be cultivated. And this is what maybe with this, what we'll call a deeper intelligence of Kaiva, or heartfelt connection, or a green mindset, and I hope we could put such a green mindset at the heart of AI systems design. Thank you very much for your attention.